Good morning, everyone in Australia. Hello in New Zealand and the rest of the world. And hello to Martha and Steve. And thank you to Team Slattery for organising such a great conference with personality. My name is Sandy Mamoli, and I have a past as a professional handball player. I used to represent Austria in the 1992 Olympics. I won the European Champions League with my team 3 times, and I can't remember how many times we won the Austrian Championships. In case you don't know handball, think water polo on land, football with your hands, with a little streak of rugby thrown in. It's a really fast-paced team sport, and the team scoring the most goals wins in the end. It's also Europe's most or second most popular sport after football. 3 years ago, I started doing CrossFit. If you don't know CrossFit, it's a mix of high intensity interval training, gymnastics, and weightlifting. And its aim is to promote general fitness, and it calls itself even the sport of fitness. So people compete to find out who is the fittest in the world. I also work for a company called Nomad 8, and that's a company I co-founded 13 years ago. We do agile coaching, agile training, and basically just sprinkle agile magic onto organizations. I get around quite a lot, and just in the last 3 years, I have been working with 19 different companies, some of them amongst the most esteemed in New Zealand. And getting around, I can see a lot of parallel between the work I do in organizations and handball and CrossFit. So first of all, work is a team effort. We know this. We know that the modern organization is based on teams. The last 15 years worth of literature, of research, the advent of Agile, new ways of working, it's all about teams. It all has teams at heart. We've been talking about the networked organization that's made out of a network of teams. And it's only not just happening right now, it's also increasingly becoming more and more so in times where uncertainty increases. But still, what's going on? We're in the team environment and we're obsessed with individual performance. We're like a dog with its bone, where our incentives, our bonus systems, our reward structures and performance reviews, even development plans, they're all geared towards the individual. Anna did a great job, stayed all night and she pulled it off. Cameron, great job running your division and running the company saving the company $20 million. Your bonus is safe. Production slowed down. Obviously, AJ didn't do a good enough job testing. So we're working in teams, but we're still doing all those things. So let me invite you into the world of sports. There's handball, obviously a team sport, where I can't achieve anything at all on my own. I can't even play on my own. We succeed together, we fail together, and I've played a lot of average games where in the end, we've still won. There are also games where I played amazingly well, and we're lost. Now contrast this with CrossFit, an individual sport where I'm completely on my own. I'm basically a team of one, and I win and lose by myself. So I got to cover all the bases as an individual athlete. And starting an individual sport has been a revelation to me. And what I realized is that at work, we live in a world of teams. We play a team sport, but still we treat people as if they were individual athletes. And there's nothing wrong with individual athletes. What's wrong is if that athlete competes in a team sport. It's that mismatch that creates a lot of friction and tension, I believe. So, CrossFit. And in case you don't know, the first rule of CrossFit is you talk about CrossFit. In CrossFit, you can measure absolutely everything. You measure the number of repetitions, you measure the number of rounds you get done, you measure the time it takes you to do a workout. And there's this huge difference between CrossFit and the team sport. I realized that in my very first CrossFit competition. I can jump. I can actually really jump. And at my first competition, I was there and everything that involved a jump, I excelled in. I was quite happy with myself until I realized there are all the other things where I have huge weaknesses. And those weaknesses leave me with absolutely no chance to place anywhere reasonably. So I've experienced how being excellent at a few things and weak at other things could cost me. As an individual athlete, every single movement that is part of CrossFit, I need to be able to do. I need to be an athlete with absolutely no gaps. The road to success for me is to focus on my individual weakness and work really, really hard on eliminating it. I work 80% on my weaknesses and 20% of my strengths. By the way, I checked with world-class athletes and that holds true for them too. Where I can talk about world-class even more is when you contrast with handball. It's where you just optimize team performance. In a team sport, the individual is irrelevant. You can't win or lose on your own. You can't even play. I used to play with this other player who was obsessed with scoring the most goals. And at times it seemed like she only counted how many goals she scored. A hugely talented player, strong, athletic, really, really, really good, but a huge ego, size of an African country. And in front of the goal, she never passed, even if there was a different player who was in a better position than her. She went for her own chance. And it felt sometimes like she'd go and high five people and go, yay, I scored 7 goals. It's like, yeah, but we lost the game. So the value of something like this is absolutely zero. So in a team sport, we focus on team competency. And we work really, really hard on eliminating weaknesses as a team, but not as an individual. In a team sport, I'm not looking for individual all-roundedness. I'm not looking for people who have no weaknesses. I'm looking for people who have exceptional world-class skills. And some weaknesses are okay. They can be supplemented by other players. So I'm looking for world-class distributed across a team and not within a single person like in CrossFit. In handball, I used to work 80% on my strengths and 20% on my weaknesses. I had talent to jump, so I worked on that really, really, really hard to become really good at this. A standing throw, I didn't really have talent. I don't have shoulders like this. My upper body strength is not amazing. So I knew even with a lot of hard work, that was something I couldn't be world class in. So there's no point to keep working on this if someone else could supplement by that. And now, take measuring in a team sport. In a team sport, you basically can't measure objectively because you can't look at the handball team and go, hey, this team scored 20 goals. And this other game over there, that team, they scored 20 goals. It doesn't actually say anything about how good or bad you are. The only thing where you can see how good or bad you are is whether you win or lose. And that really depends on the context, like the opponent, if you're at home or an away game. It's a lot more complex than CrossFit. So you know what you stand by comparing yourself against teams. And that's how you see what excellent looks like. You can see what world-class look like. looks like and see what's possible. And we don't just compare winning or losing. We also compare what's under the hood, like the number of successful passes, the number of assists, the distance between players. And again, I can't tell you how many successful passes are good or bad, but I can compare with other teams, and that will tell you something. So in our world of team sports and team at the work level, we need to realize that when we work in teams, every single one of us is working in a team. You might think that you're a manager or you're a CEO, you're still playing a team sport. Because unless you're a one-man company, you're part of a wider team. And I believe what makes things go wrong in our companies and at work is when we apply stuff from individual performance management to teams. And when I say performance management, I don't mean the secret code for firing people. I'm talking about assessing, evaluating, and optimizing performance, that whole package. And let me just give you one example where we use a tool that is absolutely misapplied in a team world. When was your last performance review? Do you remember? Think back to your last review. You've got memories? Was it a useful and constructive conversation? Or was it more intense like this? Do you leave with excitement and inspiration and walk away being all happy and excited about what's coming next? Or did you walk away with a development plan of things that you had no interest in learning, but just were an opportunity for improvement? Let me tell you, it's not just you. It's not just us dreading performance reviews. They also give incorrect information. Research shows that 60% in variance of ratings depends on the rater's perception. So what that means is the review says a lot more about the rater than the person being assessed. Research also shows that 2/3 of the people who are identified as the highest performers in a company are actually not. And not only are performance reviews totally incorrect, we also know that they are wrong. Executives, 58% of executives know that performance reviews don't enhance performance or engagement amongst the employees. You might say, well, at least they don't do any harm. But Deloitte looked into how much time they spent on performance reviews every year. And they found out they spent 2 million hours every single year on performance reviews. Let that sink in. And was mostly managers talking to each other behind closed doors. And if they consumed that much time, just imagine what we could do in our organizations with these hours. If we had all this time, what could we do? This is just one example of how we use the wrong tool. I'm not even going to go in depth with what bonuses do to us, because Daniel Pink does. And what he found out was that if you incentivize people by giving them a bonus, it is reflected in performance. It does impact performance sometimes. He did research and found out if you give an incentive to people to increase performance, the equivalent of 2 weeks worth of salary, no difference whatsoever. The same for a month's worth of bonus money, no difference. 2 months, where it actually really starts to make a difference, surprisingly enough, performance tanked. So those things are not just a waste, they're also damaging. And what about your personal development plans? I think they're heavily skewed towards an individual sport, because I think we're working 80% weakness, 20% strength. My last performance review when I was young and employed, I remember that. And I remember sitting there across with some guy who was my boss. I had just recently started as a project manager. And what came up was my weaknesses. And he told me I needed to learn about financial accounting. I needed to learn about contractual obligations. And he suggested training courses in it. I just remember sitting there going, oh my God, shoot me now. I'm so bored. I have no interest in learning any of those things whatsoever. Why do I have to? So I believe the way we measure and assess and evaluate and improve performance is no longer relevant in a modern organization. But what's the alternative? What do we do instead? Well, I say, let's compare teams. And I'm an Agile coach. And if I set this at an Agile conference, believe me, the Agile coaches will be very shocked. I'd be basically chased out in the street and probably beaten up. It's a big no. But just listen to the idea. Because I'm saying compare, not compete. I'm not going, let's smash them. I'm talking about looking at what others do, what other teams do, how they perform, assessing where you stand as a team, and deciding what you can improve. And it's even a lot easier than in sports, because this is not a zero-sum game. In order for me to win, you don't have to lose, and vice versa. We can all win. And the way this is being done, or I do it, is what I call go and see. So what does this look like? Go and visit other companies and compare your team and what they do to other teams. It can be done in person or remote. And even go and see teams within your own company and compare yourselves. I'm always surprised how something is being done really well 3 meters away from you in a different team, but people don't know about it. So just that is an amazing way to figure out where you stand and what are the things that could inspire us, that could inspire us, that we can decide we want to learn and things we want to try. Currently, I'm running a lean coffee every single week at my client's place, where we just have people from different companies and we have a lean coffee and we figure out what we want to do. A company who does that really well is Snapper in Wellington. And what they do is they assess their position and their skills as a team. So first of all, what are the skills the team needs? And it's a software development team, so they need programming, collaboration, testing, problem solving, communication, planning, and design. And then the coach and the team assess together and visualize around 2 axes. The one axis is, are you currently demonstrating the skill? And the other one, do you as a team have the confidence to execute the skill? So what you can see is programming pretty well. They have the confidence and they also know that they've got this. They demonstrate it and have the confidence. Testing is a weakness. The team know that they're not currently doing it well, and they also don't have the confidence. So it's a weakness they know about and can do something about. This system is also really good because it protects the team from hubris. Those are the things where we have this amazing confidence that we've got this, but we're actually not demonstrating it. And the other one is the lack of self-confidence, self-esteem. When a team demonstrates a skill, but they still don't really believe that they're good at it. And that's where I think comparison really helps. So actually, we thought we weren't good at this, but we are. Or we thought we were nailing this, but looking around, we're actually not. I just want to point out that before the input into this conversation, which is between the coach and the team, is both what the team think themselves and also what they have learned and seen around in other companies and other teams in the same company. So this was a real team. And so what did they do with this? They had this testing issue and they did want to improve as a skill, as a team, and they did need to cover that skill. So what they did not do, they did not add a tester. They did not force or ask one person to learn and become a specialist, because it was nobody's strength that anyone wanted to learn or specialize in. So instead, they realized we don't need to have anyone specializing in this thing. This particular skill, we can actually just all learn and distribute the skill across the team. But I keep going on about teams, and that does not mean, I want to point out, it does not mean that we don't focus on people at all, that we don't develop people. It just changes how we develop people. Like in a team sport, we need to coach and develop to strength. Because I don't think that weaknesses are opportunities for improvement. They're just weaknesses and the sign that someone else should be doing them. This is something that should be supplemented by the rest of the team. So it's done really well in a great way when people are being asked, so who do you want to be in 2 years? And that formed a core of a development plan. People say, in 2 years, I want to have those skills and I want to have those character traits and I want to improve all of those hard and soft skills. And believe me, people usually choose things they are good at, have talent for, and enjoy. I've never seen anyone choose something that's a weakness. But what they choose, of course, needs to fit with the team. And that's where I believe that self-selection is so incredibly valuable. Because if people aren't all-rounders, and they shouldn't be, then a person has a few really, really strong areas and a lot of mediocre areas. That also means that a person can be performing really badly on one team and be a totally valued member in another team. Because the value of your skill depends on how it interrelates with the rest of the skills of the team. And if we let people choose their own teams and guide them in their selection by asking them, so what can you learn? What can you teach? And what is fair to your company? Then you get small teams of people who work to their strengths and develop in areas they want to develop. So here's what we need to do. The very first thing is we need to define and enforce a base level threshold. There's some core skills and behaviors that are absolutely foundational for anyone in the workplace. Like if you can't catch and throw a ball, or you're not a team player, you won't even make it to the practice field. So if you don't know the basics of collaboration and interacting with other people, or don't have the desire and ability to learn, sorry, can't use you in our company. And we need to stick to the no asshole rule. We need to enforce a team mindset. There's that one, and that one person on a team can be absolutely toxic. That's the player who doesn't pass, just goes for her own goal. That's the person at work who's holding back information, is playing power games and just plays for their own gains. This change of behavior, or this behavior, we need to either change or get rid of. And this is not just me saying this. There's a really good book which is called The No Asshole Rule. It's by a guy named Bob Sutton. And he looks into the cost of just having one asshole on a team. It's giga-enormous. He's got numbers on it. It's giga-enormous, and it's toxic and destroys a lot. And the third thing we need to do is don't accept individual athletes. If you are in your private life, that's perfectly okay. Nothing wrong with individual sports. But I often hear individual athletes say, well, I could never do a team sport. I'd hate it because I really don't want to be dependent on anyone else. I'd totally hate it. And that's cool in your spare time. When you show up for work in a team sport, you can't be an individual athlete. Sorry to bring it to you. And what I'd like you to do is to go back to work and observe for yourselves. When are we applying individual tools to a team sport? And how can we change that? Because really, I think individual performance is irrelevant. Be a team athlete in business and leave the CrossFit mindset for your spare time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. All very illuminating. Now, I'm sure more questions will come through, so please all do add your questions. I had a question around, so the comparing of teams, I think this sounds really interesting. So how would you kind of, you mentioned that you would meet with people over lean coffee or in kind of meet groups like that. My question to you is, for people who just want to start thinking about that in their own organizations, where should they begin?
I think start internally within your own organization. Ask if you can just be a fly on the wall in a meeting, have coffee with other people and see how they do certain things. I think the best is actually observation if you can. And then if you have a network or if you have anyone has any friends anywhere else, go and visit those companies once we can all work from the office again. So I think that's would be a starting point.
Mm-hmm. And you did talk a little bit about self-selection, but just for those on the line who aren't familiar with it, could you give us a quick rundown?
Sorry, I was assuming everyone knows it. It's a facilitated process for having everyone in an organization pick which team they want to work in. And it's based on the belief that you get the best teams and people perform the best if they can work with who they want and on what they want.
Do you ever find that people don't get the team that they want because they're in self-selection? It's out of interest.
Yeah. The team you want is not just a, hey, it depends on your selection criteria, and usually help people with those criteria. It's not just say, I want to be in a team with the people who are my friends and I want to have a beer with. It's those questions, what can I actually learn from that team? How does that progress me? How can I contribute? And what can I teach others? And also, is this fair to my company? And it's a wicked problem where there are many different solutions. And people actually sometimes compromise. They don't usually get to work on a team they absolutely hate. But very often they have a discussion around what's best for the company and what's best for us. So if we just swap over here, we're both happy, even though it's not our very first choice.
So you were saying, I mean, all of this sounds like such common knowledge, but as you know, knowledge isn't always common. So why do you think in the past or still that individual performance has been prioritized and those kind of assholes have been prioritized in so many organizations?
I think it has a lot to do with history, with Taylorism and how we used to work in the factories, where bonuses, for example, and individual performance works like this. If you work in a factory and you're being measured around doing something repetitive, that is not knowledge work. That works, like the bonuses work there, and you can measure individual performance, and you're not dependent on other people. And I think it's just a hangover, which has now become this, this is how we've always done it. And we have advanced in some areas, but we have not really advanced in the other areas. So I think we just need to like even this out. So both sides of this equation make it into the modern organization.
And so does that mean we shouldn't do performance reviews at all for individuals?
Not connected to any bonus. I wouldn't. I still personally like having conversations with coaches around how they can help people develop, but the traditional performance review, I wouldn't.
Cool. And if you have maybe one piece of advice for people who are going to go back to their teams and think more about how they work as a team rather than individual performance and playing to their strengths, what tip would that be?
Can I choose two?
Of course.
Cool. I would do two things. One is the take that team assessment that I showed, figure out what are the skills that you need and where do you think that you are at as a team. And the other one is start growing your network when you go out, to just start organizing some company visits, virtual or in person, start talking to people and gain some information so you have something you can compare yourself with.
Cool. We have a question here from Q&A from Eric, just saying, can you share a good story of a huge organization that did self-selection that became a success?
Depends on what's huge, but I have personally done it with 500 people at TradeMe across 3 locations. Also a bank in New Zealand with 250 people. And also internationally, there's a number of companies in the US who have done that. I think they're a bit smaller because there are, that's within an organization, not the entire organization, and there are like 100, 120 people.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
And I also know of some Australian ones, like I think MailChimp, Australia Post. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, thank you. I think that brings us just about to time, unless there's any more questions coming through. But just if you had like an ending note for something for us to, I know I asked you about tips about your team, but in regards to ourselves, what kind of lens should we be looking through when we're thinking about how we are as parts of a team?
I think making sure you want to win, and you want to win as a team.
Well, I think that's a pretty good note to end on, Sandy. Thank you so much for your time today and for dialing in from all the way from New Zealand. We really appreciate it. And hopefully soon the Trans-Tasman bubble will be open so we can actually hang out in person. But thank you so much. Everyone give her a warm round of applause. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Yeah.